everybody. Welcome to The Right Side with Doug Billings. I appreciate you watching and listening. Don't forget, you can choose your favorite podcast platform, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, whatever. We're out there on all of them, and I would appreciate you subscribing so that you never miss an episode of The Right Side here with Doug Billings. Also, head over to YouTube. I've got a channel over there where you can catch the videos of these podcasts, and I know that you want to see the glory of everything that you're listening to on the many podcast platforms that are out there. So check out the YouTube channel and subscribe to it, and click that like button on the videos that you watch. Thank you. I appreciate it. So it's now clear today that, and as it has been really for the past few months, that the COVID-19 issue is just part of the general misinformation campaign that's being launched or has been launched by the New Democratic Socialist Party. It's not about health. It's not about a pandemic. In fact, it's not as defined. This thing isn't even a pandemic. If you look it up in Webster's dictionary, a pandemic is something that affects widely vast majorities of populations. The wildly unnecessary panic that we're going through is about a misinterpretation of the definition of pandemic. First of all, there's many things, but that's one of them, and that it includes vast geographic areas. Now, I'll give you that COVID is throughout the planet. It exists, and it has touched many different countries. So perhaps in that case, I can begin to get close. But in the United States, it's never been a pandemic, ladies and gentlemen. It has affected a few pockets of our nation and of our country. But to say that vast majorities of our population are affected, which is also part of that definition, just isn't true. It's never been true. So with less than 1% of the total population affected and only certain pockets of our country affected, it's not by definition a pandemic in the United States. There's also wordplay, ladies and gentlemen, being used here. Take the word quarantine, for example. Now, quarantine is a word that has been used when we talk about the sick in the past, and appropriately, we have quarantined the sick. It's always been that way, but now the term is being substituted for what the New Democratic Socialist Party really wants it to do to us. They want to place us under house arrest. So they use these things, social distancing and so forth. That's also a misnomer. It's not true. There's nothing, first of all, there's nothing social about being forced into isolation, is there? And we say that they'll say that you're safer at home. Well, that's not true. It may be true for the elite rich members of the New Democratic Socialist Party whose homes are mansions in the States. But you know that millions of people in America don't have safe homes, ladies and gentlemen. They don't. They don't even have basic needs at home. There are many people who are more at risk if they stay home. Millions of Americans probably couldn't afford, and I would wager to say not even probably, but most definitely couldn't even afford their homes if they're not allowed to leave their homes, to go to work, for example. Now, the government will give them handouts, they say. We'll give you a handout, we'll give you a stimulus check, or we'll give you this benefit or that entitlement or whatever. But that really isn't a solution to the long-term problem, and in the meantime, it robs people of their dignity. But the New Democratic Socialist Party has never been concerned about people's dignity. Tell that to the babies that they have been murdered in the womb throughout the years. That's really dignified. But what the New Democratic Socialist Party wants is your dependency. You see, that's what they need. They want your dependency. They want your slavery. They want your captivity. That statement, stay at home, assumes that everyone's home is just nice, safe, and plush, when really the people that are saying those silly sentences live as the elite rich members of the New Democratic Socialist Party. They're not one of the commoners. They don't understand what it means to be a commoner. They understand that they have to appeal to the mob in order to bolster their electoral base. And then there's the statement, this is all for the better good. This is all for the better good, ladies and gentlemen, if you just do these things. That's absolute nonsense. When you wreck an entire economy, causing misery and suffering, causing millions of people to lose family businesses for which they've spent their entire life building and creating, financially ruining millions of other people by the decision to shut and wreck an economy, that's not good for anybody. To think such things, ladies and gentlemen, simply reaches to the pinnacle of intellectual immaturity. Craziness. But we need to stop saying this is the new normal also. We've got to stop saying that. That's the subtle and powerful mind control right there that they're trying to use, and that's the great example of it. There's absolutely nothing normal about forced isolation. There's nothing normal about quarantining the healthy. There's nothing normal about economic shutdowns and schools shutting down when anyone under age 45, and especially children, are statistically unaffected by COVID-19. Being forced to wear masks when masks do little to nothing about actual prevention of the virus. Being misinformed about actual death numbers when in reality there have been less than 15,000 deaths, ladies and gentlemen, when COVID is listed as the primary cause of death. When we know, when we look at the analysis of death certificates issued from hospitals beginning in late January through late May, we have found that there is between 13 and 15,000 people that have died of COVID when it's a primary cause of death. It's not normal. This is not any kind of a new normal because it's not normal for a hospital to list a COVID-19 death when the patient had a lifelong heart issue and died of a heart attack. Oh, but that guy had the virus. Now, I grant you he was asymptomatic and didn't have any symptoms at all, but we're going to list it as a COVID death. That's not normal. It's not normal to be told that we have to live in fear of a virus that's so terrible and so deadly that you have to be tested in order to know if you have it or not. Think about that. If the virus is so deadly, ladies and gentlemen, why hasn't the homeless population been wiped out? I mean, they don't wear masks. They don't socially distance themselves. They don't regularly wash their hands or cleanse themselves in any kind of regular fashion. They don't live in clean conditions. Most of them are over the age of 45. Think about that. Why haven't they been wiped out? Last year, millions of people died from malaria and tuberculosis. Why weren't we told to wear a mask? Hell, we should be, according to the false logic and the fear-mongering of the left, we should have been wearing a mask since the founding of the country. It's slavery, ladies and gentlemen, in the purest sense. The Democratic Socialist Party's wish for us all. The mask. And the mask isn't about health anymore, ladies and gentlemen. The mask is simply a capitulation to the mob and a sign of animus towards President Trump. Here's why we weren't wearing a mask during the past flu epidemics that we've had, the malaria, the tuberculosis deaths. It's because the mainstream media wasn't telling us to wear a mask. Because when the 1.5 million people died of tuberculosis, it wasn't a pandemic. It wasn't a pandemic, not any more than the COVID-19 issue is today. The only pandemic that we have right now is a pandemic of wildly unnecessary fear and panic over a virus that basically has a 100% recovery rate for typical people. Like any other disease, ladies and gentlemen, it will affect and possibly kill those who are medically fragile, have pre-existing conditions, or who are elderly. Nothing new here, folks. Nothing new. It's incredible that we allow ourselves to be brainwashed by a media that just shows us one message. What you're really participating in, I think, and other people have said this besides me, is a beta test for artificial intelligence and facial recognition software that needs us to be in masks and needs us to be socially distanced so those cameras can work and begin to be tested so that they can understand what people look like in masks and how to recognize us later. It also collects data about who is compliant. On which group, which demographic does the propaganda machine work best? And they gather that data. What about the ironies of the situation? A society that kills millions of babies a year for the sake of convenience has shut itself down to prevent the deaths of adults. The New Democratic Socialist Party and its followers who would kill a human baby in the womb are now preaching to us about the sanctity of human life. If you are a person of faith, of religious character and conviction, there is no way on God's green earth that you can vote for the New Democratic Socialist Party on that platform alone. Then there's the release, talk about ironies, the release of criminals from prison because we're afraid that if they remain in jail, they'll catch COVID-19. Meanwhile, those of us who don't want to comply with the mask mandates are threatened with being put in jail. I mean, you can't make it up. And then we've seen zero, none, and words are important, zero of the so-called experts give us any accurate data during this entire time. Fauci, he's never been right. Words are important. His projections have never been correct. There were never any hospitals being overrun, ladies and gentlemen. We never had a shortage of ventilators. The news media has never been completely honest when they report any of this. And they've never run significant stories about how low morbidity rates are and how exceedingly high recovery rates are. Somehow more positive COVID cases have been reported is supposed to mean, oh God, oh no, this means more people are going to die. When in fact, less and less people are dying from it. And when you look at the total numbers of COVID deaths, when it's a primary cause of death, there haven't been hundreds of thousands of people dead from this. There's been about 15,000 people who have died from COVID when it's the primary cause of death. Everybody else, all of those other deaths had pre-existing medical conditions, were elderly, or were medically fragile in some way or another. When the government shuts down places of business, when the government shuts down factories, the economy as a whole, and when the government shuts these things down but doesn't shut down any of its own departments, doesn't lay off a single government employee, this is not about health. It's not about health. When you can't go to the dentist or have a colonoscopy, but you can go get an abortion, it's not about health. Ladies and gentlemen, when the government prevents you from buying seeds and plants for your garden, but you can go and buy booze and cigarettes, it's not about health. Now, out of these fires that we've seen, quite literally, out of the panic, the mob has arisen. It's a group of rioters, looters, rapists, murderers, felons. You know the group, arsonists and anarchists. They're the electoral base of the New Democratic Socialist Party. They have to be. They have to be their base because members of that party, Pelosi, Schumer, AOC, Ilhan Omar, the whole gang, every one of them have refused to come out publicly and condemn the mob. In fact, they encourage it. They encourage groups like Antifa and Black Lives Matter, who are really terrorist groups. They don't come out and speak against the mob. These mobs have only risen and destroyed, mind you, cities that are run and managed by the New Democratic Socialist Party, but they don't condemn them. Therefore, they must be a desired part of their electoral base. And now, they're coming after your guns. The McCluskey family in St. Louis, defending their home against the riotous thugs who broke down a gate and illegally entered into a private drive, threatening them, threatening the wife and the dog with death. The government has come in now and served a warrant and confiscated their weapons. It is absolutely stunning, and it's unlawful and unconstitutional that they've done this, that the government has done this. Now, the McCluskeys are going to prevail in court, I have no doubt, but I've still called on Governor Mike Parson of Missouri. Governor Mike Parson, you have got to put an end to this illegal and absurd prosecution of the McCluskeys. You are a Republican, sir. We are desirous. We are begging you to have the strength and the fortitude to stand up against this illegal, unconstitutional prosecution of American citizens who are defending their God-given right. They're defending their God-given right of home and property and life and liberty. You know, there's a basic fundamental principle at stake here. We're going to have to make an answer for it in November when we vote. The principle is this, that our founding fathers intended this country to be capitalistic. They intended the government to serve us and to protect us, not to govern our own decisions about our own personal health and safety. So are we going to consent then to giving up personal liberty and allow ourselves to become the slaves of the new Democratic Socialist Party? Or are we going to go about the right that we have to reserve making those kinds of decisions, our own decisions, about our personal health and our safety, and for that of our children? Because if you really want to know who's in charge, think about this. If you really want to know who's in charge, ladies and gentlemen, just think about who you can criticize and speak out against without the fear of retribution or retaliation. Think about that one. If you want to know who's really trying to be in charge here. Because the minute you can speak up against the new Democratic Socialist Party, they're not the party of inclusiveness and welcomeness. You'll see right away that if you don't believe and do what they say, then you'll be met with violent retribution or retaliation. You see, there's vast millions of people who will vote for and support President Trump in the upcoming election, ladies and gentlemen. Millions of them. The vast majority of this country supports it. And the vast majority of this country turns away from the mob and the actions that we've seen recently on television. But we won't put a bumper sticker on our car. They won't wear a MAGA hat. Or they won't put a yard sign for Trump and Pence in their front yard because they're afraid that the mob will vandalize their car, will attack them personally, or throw stones and rocks or spray bullets through their living room windows, which is clearly what the mob has done. But thankfully, although it's dreadful and it's terrible to see on TV, we know that the mob represents less than 0.5% of our population, and they will never be mainstream. They will always be on the fringe. They'll always be marginalized, thankfully. But we can't take it for granted, and we can't let up. The Founding Fathers intended this country to be one of freedom, liberty, self-governance, and the government very limited in what it can do and what it can tell us to do, what it can mandate us to do. With every wild decision that these new Democratic Socialist leaders make, the governors who shut down businesses, who continually don't let people go to work, who shut down public places of enjoyment, whether it's a restaurant, a bar, or a beach, a movie theater, with every decision they make that does that, they nudge the country closer to the red, closer to the Republican Party. You can count on it. And you won't see that in a poll. You won't see it reported in the news. But there is absolutely no way that they win in November. The vast majority of the people in this country are absolutely sickened by the mob. They understand that Black Lives Matter is a terrorist organization, that Antifa is out to destroy and deconstruct this country. Their elected leaders don't even hide that fact anymore. Ilhan Omar wants to deconstruct the country. And we've got to start to address the fact whether or not we need to amend the Constitution so that people not born in one of the 50 states can be elected to high-ranking public office. The good news is that the vast majority of people in this country are God-fearing, good, wholesome, hard-working people. The people that you don't see reported in the news every night. We believe in God and the founders. We believe in each other. And so I hope and I pray that God continues to bless you, ladies and gentlemen. We all have a pack of blessings on our back. With proper perspective, all we have to do is look and see that all of the trials, all of the tribulations, all of the adversities that we face in this life become blessings with proper perspective. So may He continue to bless you, and may God continue to bless the United States of America. And thanks as always. I appreciate it deeply for watching and listening to The Right Side with Doug Billings. Good night, and God bless.